Steady Eddie. Edward is one of the oldest engines on the island of Sodor. Edward may not always be the fastest engine, but he is certainly the steadiest. And for Sir Topham Hatt, a steady engine is a really useful engine. One morning, Edward puffed into the docks. Good morning. Then Sir Topham Hatt arrived. The brand new brass water wheel has just arrived from the mainland. It is magnificent. It will be displayed by the waterworks at Great Waterton. Emily, Gordon, and Edward were very excited. They couldn't wait to see the magnificent water wheel. Edward, you will deliver the water wheel to Great Waterton. Edward beamed from buffer to boiler. Gordon and Emily were surprised. I have chosen you, Edward, because you are the steadiest engine. You are to take the express line. It is the smoothest and most direct way to Great Waterton. Gordon gasped. Edward was going to use his express line. Cranky lowered the water wheel onto Edward's flatbed. It had a shiny brass rim that gleamed in the sun. Everyone looked at the magnificent water wheel. Edward the Steady is at the ready. And very slowly, Edward pushed his special out of the docks. Edward puffed up to the junction for the express line. Thomas was waiting. Bust my buffers, Edward. That's a very special. Edward was very happy. He looked ahead. If he took the express line, he couldn't stop for the people to admire his magnificent water wheel. But if he took the other track, he could stop at stations and bridges and sidings. A lot of people would see his special. The signal changed. Edward didn't take the express line. Edward was having a wonderful time. He went past stations, under bridges, and past farms. Everyone cheered and waved. Edward the Steady was now Edward the Magnificent. Edward arrived at the junction. The track ahead's in need of repair. But the track ahead led to the school. Edward wanted the school children to see him. So he chuffed on towards the broken track. The track was very bumpy and jumpy. The shiny brass edge of the wheel started to cut into the ropes. But Edward didn't know. At the school, children cheered and waved. Edward wasn't looking at the red signal. Oh, flatten my fender. Edward applied his brakes, but too late. The shiny brass edge of the water wheel cut even deeper through the ropes. Edward knew now his long journey had made him late. Then he had an idea. I will chuff up Gordon's Hill, Edward thought. It's the fastest way to Great Waterton. And, he huffed to himself, the other engines on the hill will all see my special. Edward chuffed and huffed up Gordon's Hill. Oliver and Arthur passed him coming down. They both thought his special was magnificent. But the water wheel was very heavy. Edward huffed and puffed up the hill. At last, he reached the top. But the edges of the water wheel were cutting deeper and deeper into the ropes. Then there was trouble. With a final jolt, the ropes broke. The magnificent water wheel rolled off Edward's flatbed. Fizzling fireboxes! Gordon was further down the hill with flatbeds of scrap iron. The water wheel rolled down the hill. it bounced onto Gordon's flatbed. Now, Edward's magnificent water wheel was on its way to the smelters. Edward had to get to the smelter's yard before Gordon. Edward puffed and Edward panted along every shortcut he knew. No one saw Edward pass, and no one stopped to wave. That no longer mattered to Edward. He had to save his magnificent water wheel from the smelters. Gordon puffed slowly into the smelter's yard. He pulled up outside the smelting shed. Then, suddenly, there was Edward. Gordon was surprised. Edward the Steady had won his race against the fastest engine on Sodor. The magnificent water wheel was once again tied down to Edward's flatbed. Edward the Steady, once more at the ready. And his wheels clickety-clacked without a cheer or a clap along the way. The water wheel was put into place. It looks grand. It looks magnificent. And Edward didn't need anyone to tell him that this had been a very special.